Welcome to Food, Wine, and Whiskey, a podcast about having fun conversations on tasty dishes, vinos, and spirits from around the world. Rob is your host. He is an avid home chef, WSET Level 2 award in wine, and a whiskey drinker and collector. Time to set the table. Here's Rob.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the show. Thank you very much for stopping in for another episode. And as you can see by the title, I mean, it's a topic everybody loves. I never met a person who doesn't enjoy pizza. So that's our topic today. And I have a very special guest, a man full of knowledge, full of experience, and he's going to share that with us here today, the Doughfather of Houston, Ravi Singh. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Great to have you on, and I'm looking forward to this conversation. But before we get started and all the questions that I have as a pizza nerd, let's start with just who you are, your background, where did this passion for pizza? Oh, that's a new. I might coin that passion for pizza.
I like the way that kind of rolls off the tongue.
It does. Yeah. Where did this come from? Give the listeners a little background of who you are and how you got into pizza as deep as you have.
Okay, great. Yeah. So I'm a Houston resident, but I grew up in the East Coast, and so I really got exposure to New York style pizza growing up. And to me, New York style slices in the East Coast is like having a great taco in Houston. You know, it's that kind of same type of relationship and nostalgia for that. But I spent a lot of time in Europe, and that's when I got exposed to more Neapolitan style pizza. And that was really mind-blowing to me because there's a purity in that pizza that's very different than New York style, right? Because the dough is much simpler, but the tomatoes really come through. It's a simpler pizza, and the mozzarella is a lot fresher, and the basil just pops. And I said, what is this all about? I need to find this more. And then along the years, I experimented with pizza making, but I never made my own dough. My younger brother's actually a chef. My mom's an amazing cook. And I took a lot of my pasta making techniques, like cook sauces and kind of overdoing it. And I tried to put that on dough that I could find, In fact, at some points, I would buy dough from local pizzerias and try to cook that in my home oven and make it work. But a few years back, about 7 or 8 years ago, I was just kind of going through a time in my life where I was in some doldrums, and I came across this video on YouTube about pizza making, and it was by Frank Pinella, who's the host of The Pizza Show. Have you seen The Pizza Show?
I have not.
Oh, man.
The name sounds familiar, but I need to check it out for sure.
It's amazing. I think any listener that loves pizza should start watching that. Okay. It's a legendary show. Frank owns a pizzeria in Brooklyn called Best Pizza. And so he has this video, and I saw that, and I said, that doesn't look that complicated. Let me give it a shot. And so one weekend I made 3 pizzas. Next weekend I made 3 more. Next, I doubled the recipe, and within about a month, I was making 12 pizzas every weekend. And that kind of set me on the course to master a Neapolitan-style pizza. Got a book by Ken Forkish, kind of taught me how to make Neapolitan pizza. And then one thing led to another, and it kind of blew up. So I was thinking about this today when I was coming over. I thought, a lot of people don't think about pizza as being like a health food. I think that's relatively fair.
Yeah.
You can make it healthy if you're really kind of conscientious about it. But at that time, it was like a heart food. It was a food that I needed for my heart.
Sure.
And it kind of got me onto a path of growth that I'm very thankful for. And so now, after I've done lots of events and private parties and pizza and wine tastings, I'm really focused now on teaching pizza classes. Because like you said, who doesn't love pizza?
Absolutely. And we're going to get into I call it the evolution of pizza, because I think it's, like a lot of things in our societies today we've taken this deep dive into, understanding and where it comes from and the quality and things like that. But we'll get into that. Mentioning your pizza classes and things like that. How can people find you, reach out to you here in Houston? They hear that and they go, hey, wait a second, we might want to have this guy come show us how to make some pizzas. How do they get a hold of you?
Absolutely. So I basically connect with people on Instagram. So Doughfather HTX. You can, follow me there and then message me, and that's usually how we'll connect. There are pizza classes that are held at the Texas Wine School, right in Upper Kirby. So I do a pizza and wine tasting there, work with the sommelier. I'll make 4 unique pizzas that are very gourmet. I kind of think of it like a pizza omakase, like a tasting menu. Yeah. And each pizza slice is paired with 2 wines. So we have a really kind of interesting intellectual and gastronomical experience kind of comparing these flavors and
that's awesome.
working with the sommelier. It's super fun. And then the other pizza classes I either will hold in people's private residences. We'll get a bunch of people together and teach you how to make dough, sauce, how to cook pizza, or at my home.
And I'm assuming the class like that at somebody's home turns into a little bit of a pizza party. I mean, you got to eat what you make, right?
Yeah, anytime you have pizza, it's going to be a party.
So when you do it at somebody's house, is there a ceiling for the number of people you want to be a part of that?
I would say, 8 to 14
you can go
is
that
not
okay.
bad. Sure,
Okay.
sure. Well, someone's got to eat it too. So
Sure.
the more
That's
the
a good
merrier.
point.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But the part I think of pizza making that creates the most anxiety for people is all around the dough. So that's what we focus on in the hands-on class.
Yeah.
If you just want to eat amazing pizza, come to the pizza and wine classes and you can just enjoy.
Yeah,
And I do all the work.
and get an understanding of
exactly.
pizza and wine.
Yeah.
But I agree with you on the dough, and we'll get into that as well,
Yeah.
because I know a lot of people who have gotten into the pizza, craze, but they go to the store and buy, whether it's Trader Joe's, which isn't awful dough, but they buy dough. But there's something to be said for being able to make your own dough. And I'm looking forward to having that part of the conversation with you, because you are the Doughfather.
Exactly. Thank you. And I will be very happy to give my point of view on store-bought dough, pizzeria dough, which if people don't know, you can just ask to buy a ball of dough. You can do that.
Yeah.
And the virtues of homemade dough. We'll get there.
Absolutely. Let's start with the craze. I mean, the pizza craze is in full force. It's probably been the last couple of years, maybe 3 or 4 years. I've got into pizza like you about 7, 8 years ago, built a little oven out back, and really went down the rabbit hole of pizza. Not as good as you, but I'm still, fingers crossed I'll get there at some point.
I must interrupt you because I tried your dough today. I made a margarita pizza earlier with it, and it's fantastic. So I said that on air.
I appreciate that. I'm off to a good start then.
It's very good.
But the craze, I mean, what have you seen? Because I have my thoughts on kind of how it was it was on this trajectory of just slowly going up and getting more popular. And I feel like all of a sudden in the last year and a half, 2 years I'll just throw it out there, Uni and Ghazni have gotten into the market of home pizza making, and it just peaked. I mean, it's still on an upward trend if you ask me. I don't think it's leveled out. What's your take on the pizza craze?
Well, when you think back to that story I told you about a Neapolitan margarita pizza, that's very hard to pull off in the home oven. And when these pizza ovens like the Rockbox or the Uni were launched out into the market, it democratized pizza making because now everyone has that heat,
Sure.
and now you can make those kinds of pizzas. I think that's really where it took off. And then making dough is a little addictive. And making pizza is addictive because no 2 pizzas will ever be the same. So it's always a bit of surprise. And it's easy enough that you can get into it, and it's challenging enough that you can keep growing with it. So remember, there's a lot of people got into making sourdough during the pandemic a few years ago. Pizza has that same type of appeal where it's something you can kind of grow with.
Yeah. And the other thing I like about the pizza craze is, I always say with Food, Wine, and Whiskey, the podcast, it's all about bringing people together to enjoy these kind of things. Because ultimately, who wants to make a pizza and eat it by themselves? You'd rather who wants to open a bottle of wine and drink it by themselves?
Yeah.
I want to have people over and share and enjoy with that experience. And man, pizza is great in being able to do that. Not just from the standpoint of sharing what comes out of the oven, but everybody who comes to your house to do a pizza cook can be involved in the process of making pizza. And I think that's people that have never done it, who have come to my house, absolutely love it, and then get this itch to go buy an oven and want to start doing it themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I mentioned earlier, that pizza is a food more for the heart. That's a big part of it.
Sure.
Right? It's not just the way it kind of taps into certain nostalgia for certain places you've been and times of your life when you're eating pizza, and it just brings that memory back in the flavor profile, but it's also like a social food. And so I found that the more I made pizza, the more my social circle started growing, and even friends and family that appreciated pizza and we had those shared experiences were kind of more into that circle. So it's great for the heart. Yeah.
The other thing I like about, pizza at home, if you're going to order or go to a pizza shop, and by all means, there's times we still do where we're just craving a pizza and you want to order it, so you do. But having pizza at home, I really love being able to be creative and, having multiple types of pizza, meaning toppings that you can try. I'll cut it for 6-8 people. One slice of that is all I want because I want to move on to the next flavor profile. I don't want to just eat a whole pepperoni or a whole, Neapolitan margarita or something like that.
So usually when I have pizza parties, I kind of calculate it a certain way. If I get 8 slices out of the pizza, I want to invite 8 people. So everyone just gets that one slice. Yeah. And we'll make usually, honestly, a regular party about 6 slices.
Yeah.
6 pizzas, that is. Sorry. 6 pizzas so everyone can try one of each pizza.
Absolutely. And, I've found, and you can tell me, and we're going to get into this with the dough, but, you think that's, dough is going to be very heavy. And you've already mentioned it's not a health food, but it's really, to me, homemade dough, I get on the scale the next morning. It's not as bad as you might think it is.
No, not at all. And if you understand dough and bread making and you understand kind of what makes dough, there's a special word here, digestible, then you can kind of make your dough intentionally. And you'll find that you don't feel so heavy afterwards, it digests well, and usually the gluten impact is a lot more, gentle on you.
Sure.
So it's like sourdough. The reason a lot of folks who are gluten sensitive eat sourdough, can eat sourdough, is because of the nature of what the yeast does and how it kind of pre-digests the things that will irritate you. So I would say there's 2 things. It's the long fermentation is a big part of it, and the other one is making very thin crust pizzas. Or a Neapolitan pizza, most of the dough is at the crust, and the middle is barely a millimeter thick. So there's things you can do to modulate it to make it a bit on the healthier side.
Makes sense.
But long fermentations is the key. All of my pizzas are done at least 48 hours fermentation.
And so that leads us into the dough. Let's start having that conversation. Because when you think about pizza, I don't care what style. Toppings can be similar no matter what style of pizza you're making. It's usually the dough that defines what type of pizza you're making, whether it's New York or Neapolitan or Detroit, which is on focaccia bread. I say. So let's talk about the dough.
Yeah.
Give me your thoughts, where you started, kind of where you are with making dough.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's no coincidence that I'm not called the pizza guy. I'm called the Doughfather.
Yeah.
When you think about sushi, you usually think about fish, but really sushi starts with rice. If you don't get that rice correct, the right temperature, flavor, the right consistency, you don't have good sushi. True with pasta as well. Pasta that's overcooked is just a limp noodle.
Yeah.
It's got to be al dente. It's got to hold the sauce, which is considered a condiment. It's not actually all about the sauce. And so pizza is exactly the same way, where you've got to focus on the dough, and literally anything you put on top of good dough is going to create a very gratifying experience.
Yeah. I always say it's like, making a burger. It's all about the bun. Not all about, but it's a very important part. A sandwich, very important what kind of bread. The vessel that carries the toppings is so important to making it tasty and, delicious.
You can't downplay that. And so I think putting more effort into the dough is where the big payoff is. And while people do get a little anxious about making dough and they feel like it's mystical and mysterious, it's actually not that complicated.
Yeah.
There's some magic that happens often by leaving your dough alone. So that 48-hour fermentation, I'm not spending time with the dough. It's just in the fridge, fermenting very slowly. Also, there's processes like autolyse, which is a very simple process. You mix your water, flour, yeast together, and you let it sit for 30 minutes. Don't even knead it.
Yep.
Just let it sit.
The moisture in the flour.
Yeah, and so the moisture starts to activate the gluten. And when you touch it 30 minutes later, it's a completely different dough. So the magic is a lot in the chemistry and the nature of what these ingredients will do on their own. It's not about getting a great KitchenAid or using some fancy materials.
Yeah.
It's really not that mysterious. Just get your hands dirty.
And I will say, to me, there's one thing that will make you very successful in making dough. And it's not that hard. It's a piece of equipment called a scale. And you have to use grams.
Not
cups, not scoops.
Teaspoons, none of that stuff. This is very funny, right? I think most of the world has this trait, which is measure everything in grams, perhaps measure distance in kilometers. We're not going to talk about that today, but two of the first tools that I bought when I started making pizza were 2 different scales. A micro scale for measuring yeast, because you have to do yeast at, 10th or 100th of a gram, sometimes usually 10th of a gram. and then a slightly bigger digital scale so I could measure my flour, water, other ingredients, all in grams. Yeah, so grams is interesting because that leads you into the math of pizza making too, right? Bakers talk a lot about bakers' percentages, percentage of hydration or percentage of different flours. So those scales make your life a lot easier, so you can talk in that common language that bakers and kind of chemists will use when they start getting into dough making, because dough making is chemistry, and every time you make dough, it's an experiment. So you're making your life a lot easier when you move away from the teaspoons and
to me, it's a must.
inches
It's an
and
absolute
cups.
must. If you're going to have success and enjoy it and see the results you want, it's a must
You
to have this scale.
Start there.
Yeah.
And they're cheap. They're not that expensive.
And they're cheap. And I call them the catapult.
Yeah.
Because once you start doing that and making dough for pizza, it catapults you into going, well, wait a second, I can make focaccia and I can make French bread and I can make hoagie rolls for cheesesteaks or sandwiches. And so you know, pizza dough making almost catapults you into this, I'm now a bread maker.
Now you're a bread maker, yeah. It's interesting too, because I see your coffee setup here. It's very impressive. And that was probably the kind of gateway for me to make pizza, because I got a scale to measure my coffee beans. And I started realizing that coffee is all about kind of weight, time, temperature, right?
Grams of coffee to grams of water.
And then how long you steep it. So pizza is very much the same way. It's, you've got to measure in grams, and time and temperature are ingredients in your pizza making, right? The time that you're fermenting, the time you're cooking, the temperature of the oven, the temperature of the fridge, the temperature of your room. So those are elements of the recipe that most people just don't think of.
Yeah. The other thing I would say that's important to understand, and I'm going to throw some things out that are, for me and you, I think we get it, and we don't even think about it, but hydration. And you're going to hear that in, you were mentioning it a minute ago. When you start making dough, hydration is very important when we talk about the percentage of water to flour.
Right.
And for anybody who's starting in pizza and wants to make dough, I always tell them, start at that 60% hydration, 60% water to the volume of flour you're using.
Yeah, so if you have 100 grams of flour, then you put about 60 grams of water.
Yeah.
I will kind of give my point of view on this, and this really came from Ken Forkish's book, Elements of Pizza, which was geared towards the home chef that would cook in their conventional oven. Conventional ovens hit about 550 degrees, which is at least 200 degrees lower than what a pizza oven will get you, right? So with a conventional oven, it's going to take a lot longer to cook, so you want a wetter dough. So closer to 70% hydration, cooking at 550 degrees for 7 minutes. So everyone, that is your ratio.
That's a great point, though. That's a very good point.
And when you're cooking in a pizza oven, because it can get up to 900 degrees very easily, you want to have lower hydration, closer to 60%, and it will cook in about 2 minutes.
Yeah, because, just to try to simplify that, what you're talking about is the amount of water in that dough. So if you have more hydration, it's cooking longer at 550 in the home oven. It takes longer to, so to speak, steam out the dough. The water. Yeah,
exactly.
And in the high heat, it cooks fast, so you don't want that much water because you want it to cook and crisp up
exactly.
quick.
Yeah, and what's very interesting is for more advanced Neapolitan-style pizza makers, you can play with the hydration and the heat to get different styles of Neapolitan pizza. So if you want a more traditional Neapolitan pizza, you do about 60% hydration, which is a relatively dry dough.
Yeah.
And you cook it around 800 degrees, and you're going to get not too puffy of a pizza. It's going to cook in about 2 minutes or so, right? If you increase that to 70%, a very wet dough, and you put it in a slightly hotter oven, you're going to get that really puffy Canotto-style Neapolitan pizza, and which is going to be floppier, not as crispy, but it's going to have a nice airier quality and a bit chewier. So this is fun, you know? I've made thousands of pizzas. It is. I made thousands of pizzas, and I've kind of played with these different kind of angles.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing I would say about making dough is be patient, because you're gonna have some struggles, and you're gonna watch a YouTube video. And by the way, I would say watch some YouTube videos. It's a great resource. If you're here in Houston, call the Doughfather, call Ravi. But if you're not, YouTube. These pizza chefs do a great job in walking you through it, and they make it look easy.
They do.
And when you start, making dough balls and forming dough balls, and then when we talk about a higher hydration, handling a wetter dough, there's some techniques and there's some ways to do it. It might get frustrating that you're not having the success you want, be patient.
Yeah. I can imagine my phone ringing off the hook, as we used to say, with people who are interested in taking classes. But YouTube is where I learned a lot of my techniques, and there's thousands of hours of great content out there for that. I will say that one of the things that I've seen people struggle with the most when they're in my classes and handling dough is that dough is very sticky and they don't know what to do about that. It's all over their fingers and stuff. Usually you scrape that dough off your fingers, press it into the dough ball, cover it, and just let it sit for 15 minutes. And with that water absorption, it will be much easier to handle. Then later, when you're making dough balls, it's all around kind of getting surface tension in your dough ball. If you keep rolling your dough balls around, you never create surface tension, kind of like a balloon filling up with air, then it's never going to really hold its shape.
Right.
And the third big tip with handling dough is that the moment you're ready to make your pizza, take your dough out of whatever container it's in, directly into a flour bath.
Yes.
Right? Because flour acts basically as a lubricant for the pizza. If you have any areas that aren't floured up, they stick to you and stick to the pizza piece.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, prior to getting into that flour bath, let's talk about the fermentation. You mentioned this a couple of times.
Yeah.
You're a 48-hour fermentation.
Yep.
Some people who are interested in hearing this podcast because they know nothing about pizza, they're going, what the hell
What's
are you talking about? Yeah. And so what is this?
Yeah, so fermentation is very interesting because it's really a process that has everything to do with yeast and what yeast is doing as it's feeding off the starches in your flour. So often you'll see New York style pizza recipes will have some sugar in the recipe. And that's really got two reasons. One is that it helps the pizza brown in your conventional oven, but it also helps feed the yeast. Yep. So yeast needs sugars. There's a lot of sugars already present in flour, so yeast is mostly feeding off of that. So the outcome of this yeast feeding off of this is that it needs to digest it and do something with it. So as Frank Pinello said, it's kind of like farting. It's creating gas, and that gas starts to increase and creates the bubbles in your pizza. So if you create pizza dough in a clear plastic container and you look at the underside of it as it's growing and you see the volume getting bigger on the top side, if you look underneath, you'll see a bunch of bubbles growing there. And that's a sign that your yeast is doing its work and that the fermentation process has started. So longer fermentations require less yeast. But if you want to make dough that's going to be ready in 2 hours, you're going to put a lot of yeast.
What's your thoughts on that?
I would generally avoid any pizza dough that hasn't fermented 8 hours because it's going to sit a bit like Play-Doh in your stomach.
Yeah.
And Play-Doh is not very digestible, as maybe some children might tell you. So you really want the yeast to do its work to improve the digestibility of your dough. A lot of people think in my 2-hour pizza class, 3-hour pizza class, that we make the dough and we cook it. We don't. I do what we do or they do on TV, right?
Yeah.
That trick of having some pre-made 48-hour dough. We pull that in after we've made our dough in class, and we swap it out so that we cook the long fermented dough.
Sure. And then they can take that home with
them. They take
them?
the other stuff home.
Yeah.
And they leave that in the fridge to ferment.
That's the way to do it.
You can also, there's also maybe a little bit of a conversation about cold fermentation versus room temperature fermentation, ambient temperature fermentation. In Naples, typically they'll make the dough in the morning and have it ferment all day long as dough balls, just in the warm atmosphere of a pizzeria. Okay. And it really will ferment quite well to be a digestible pizza.
Yeah.
And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. It's the traditional way of doing it. If you do a longer cold fermentation, what the cold does is suppresses the yeast from, being too active.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what will happen if you do that is you're going to have this crazy bubbly dough and you won't really be able to work with it. So the cold fermentation just slows it down, but the yeast is still working. And it's important to consider, what happens if you over ferment a dough, or if you let 48 hours is good. Well, then 96 hours must be better, right?
Yeah.
And that's really not how flour works. So flour has a peak point in terms of its strength. And typically it's around 24 hours, but 48 hours improves the digestibility more. So that window is still pretty strong flour, so it doesn't tear or become unmanageable when you're stretching the pizza.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you and I have talked. You have found that for your dough, Could be slightly different for other folks, but for you, 48 hours is your sweet spot.
It is absolutely a sweet spot. So, for example, if I'm going to cook pizza for a pizza party on a Saturday, I make my dough on a Thursday.
Yeah.
And it's simple as that. And the dough making process takes about 2 hours, including all the time I'm waiting. It's not like an active 2 hours. And then at the end of the 2 hours, I'll make dough balls, put it in the fridge, and then just wait for 2 days.
Yeah.
So it takes a little pre-planning. When I first started, I would make dough in the morning to cook in the evening. I got used to then doing the dough a day in advance. And now for me, it's like clockwork doing it 2 days. Thursday is my day.
That's your pizza day,
Yeah,
or dough day.
Pizza dough day.
That's
It's
dough
dough
day,
day, yeah.
I'm going to drop 2 words that we won't get into too
No.
far. It'll just trigger the listeners to go do a little homework if they don't know about this. But Polish and biga, two other, call it fermenting processes that help the dough.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't really want to admit on a recording like this that I have never done sourdough.
Yeah.
The reason I've never done sourdough is that I do other pre-fermentation techniques like biga and Polish kind of when I'm in the mood to do it. And what they give you is slightly different quality in the dough, primarily in the nose of the dough, the aroma of the dough. So a biga or a Polish is a pre-fermentation you do. One is dry, one is wet, and they will make your dough smell better. And you'll just get a nice aroma from that. Less neutral than doing a direct dough. So the biga, you can imagine the Polish, you can imagine as being a wet, bubbly soup, almost like a batter that's full of bubbles. And the biga is more like shaggy dough. So the process is interesting. I think it's very cool. It'll give you 12 to 24 hours extra fermentation, which makes the final dough much more digestible.
Absolutely.
And as I mentioned earlier, we kind of say biga goes up. So you're going to have a more structured, sturdy dough that will tend to puff up more. And Polish goes out, which will be a bit more flexible, but very digestible.
So I would say if you're going to get into pizza making, these are 2 things to at least try.
Yeah,
do it once or twice. And that's the whole point of all of this is, I mean, there's just so many ways you can go with doughs and different recipes for doughs for all kinds of styles of pizza. Go explore.
Yeah.
Go have a good time. I love doing that.
Yeah, I would definitely start simple, and then when you kind of want to branch out a little, then do your biga and Polish. Maybe you'll do sourdough one day. You could even do things like putting 10% rye or 5% rye, or switch different types of flours, do 50-50 flours, All those things are out there, and the experiments never end.
Yeah, and we're not going to go down all of them. I mean, that could be a show itself, just all the different types of flours and doughs you can make. But there are all kinds of doughs. Flours. What I would say is use a quality flour. I think that makes a difference. All-purpose is fine, but I think you would agree one thing that you want is on the package to tell you kind of the proteins that you have. And then I think, would leaven be your low for 11%?
I'd say anywhere between 11 and 13%.
Yes,
I had 12% in my mind.
Yeah.
And
King Arthur's a great one.
King Arthur's exactly the one that came to mind. So King Arthur bread flour is my go-to.
It's 12.7.
12.7. If you can get an organic King Arthur bread flour, it's going to be the best stuff you can use.
Yeah.
Short of getting an Italian double O flour.
Yeah. Okay. Talking about not getting started, keeping it simple. The home oven's fine. If you want to get
lovely.
into,
It's great.
I think one of the downsides of how big pizza's gotten, there might be this perception by people, watching pizza videos on YouTube going, God darn it, I got to have a pizza oven.
You do not.
And you don't.
No, you don't.
You make some great pizzas in your oven.
There are many pizza parties I do that are strictly in the conventional oven.
Okay.
Because I like that style of pizza. The mouthfeel is different.
It's more
usually
New York
crispier.
style.
It's New York style. And it's excellent. It's great pizza, but it will be crispier and browner. You won't get that like leopard spotting and charring from it unless you put it under the broiler for about 30 seconds towards the end. But there's so many different pizza styles out there. So I think you just respect the style you're making at that moment and make that pizza your own. The number one power trick that I give everyone about making pizza in your conventional home oven, if you're going to use like a pizza peel and drop it onto a pizza stone, is don't use a pizza stone. Use a baking steel.
Yes.
The baking steel will radiate 30 to 50 degrees more heat than a pizza stone. It'll make a crispier pizza with a nice browned bottom.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that. I know pizza steels can be kind of hard to find.
Yep.
I've never even checked on Amazon.
Amazon. Yeah, I got a couple off of there.
Okay.
I also have a friend who actually gave me some an alloy that he had, and he cut it for me and put it in my oven. And
Oh, nice.
I've been using that for years.
And usually they're rectangle, right?
Yeah, rectangular typically.
So
yeah.
you have a size that you like, 14 by 16?
I would say 14 because it gives you a slightly bigger target.
Yeah.
In case you have issues
Getting
it
off
right
the-
onto the right onto your
So that does bring up, you need to have a peel, a pizza peel.
Pizza peel.
And maybe two, maybe a wooden one for launching, a metal one for getting it out of the oven.
I think it's a really good approach. There is a composite peel. I think it's called an Epicurean peel that I use for my home oven. And that is good for both launching and pulling out. It's very thin. It washes very well. So it's not like wood where you maybe don't want to get it so wet. And it doesn't have all the kind of problematic qualities of metal.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who are very proud of their metal peels because they come with their ovens and the pros use metal, but most pros actually use wood.
Yeah.
It's easier, it's more forgiving, and why make it harder than it has to be?
I think about, New York or up in Connecticut, New Haven, when you see those big pizzerias of coal. I mean, they have a pizza peel that's probably 30 feet long.
Oh, yeah, the long ones, yeah. Actually, the Roman style.
And they're wood, yeah.
Yeah, the Roman style Taglio pizzas are a few feet long.
Are they?
And they make these very long pizzas at the top afterwards, after they bring it out of the oven. So it's just basically a long bread, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and when we talk about cooking pizza in the home oven, we're talking about this New York style pizza on a stone or steel, which is great. But you can do all kinds of pizzas, and then this gets back to exploring the world of pizza. You can do I love Boston bar pie. I don't know if you've ever had Boston.
I do.
Okay,
Yeah, I do
Boston
like
bar pie. You can do Detroit, buy those pans, and you can buy specific pans. It doesn't have
The Lloyd's pans are the best.
Lloyd's
for
are the
those.
best
Yeah,
for sure. That's what I use for Boston bar pie too.
Right. What's nice about Lloyd's, it's special because I made the mistake of not buying a Lloyd's pan. I've just bought basically like a cake pan.
Oh yeah.
And the issue with the cake pan was it didn't radiate that heat.
On the side.
And I also, on the side and even the bottom, so it didn't really get very crispy.
Okay.
The other thing that I heard, and I'm not a scientist, so don't quote me on this, is that Lloyd's pans.
But did you stay in a Holiday Inn Express last night? Maybe.
So the Lloyd's pans are dark metal, and apparently that heats up more.
Oh, okay.
And this is the only reason I do believe this is because I have a dark pan that I use in my toaster oven where I make my more focaccia style pan pizza, and that crisps up better. So I'd say a dark,
makes sense.
Heavy metal pan is great for any type of focaccia or
Which
sheet pizza.
leads me into another vessel for making pizza, cast iron.
It's brilliant.
If you have, a
it's
lot
great.
of people have one of those, and there's your pizza pan. You
Yeah.
can make great pizza, and it doesn't have to be a focaccia style big. You can make a thinner crust in there as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So the way cast iron works is interesting. Is instead of having a hot pizza steel or baking steel or hot pizza stone in your oven, you basically put your cast iron on the burner.
Preheat it.
And you preheat it. And it's steel also. It's a metal as well. So once it preheats, once it's kind of medium hot, I tend to put a little olive oil in there, and then I put my stretched dough in there.
Yep.
Cook it with some sauce for a few minutes, about 4 or 5 minutes. Check underneath there, see if it's getting brownish. And then I put some cheese toppings, and then I put it into my home oven, which should be preheated, and cook it for the last 3 or 4 minutes. And it makes a very crispy pizza.
Very crispy. And if, to your point, when you pull it out, if it's not still crispy to where you want it, then again,
Put it back on the burner.
Right back on the burner. You're not
Easy.
cooking the top. You're just cooking the bottom,
Yeah.
and it's great.
Personally, I'd say I would go with cast iron and conventional oven before I bought a pizza oven.
Yeah.
Because, sometimes you buy a pizza oven, you just raise the bar too high.
Yeah.
If you don't have success right in the beginning, you get demoralized.
That's a
And
good point.
I am a pizza teacher, and I like to keep people's morale up.
Yeah.
And I would recommend experimenting first and getting addicted.
The other thing I would say is, I think you mentioned this talking about yourself that, when you got into making pizza, your social friend, your social network kind of grew,
it really
because of
did.
pizza. Find somebody in your community, in your neighborhood, on Facebook in a group, ask somebody if they're making pizza and have them come over for a pizza night if they can do that and show you how they make their dough and things like that.
And take the feedback.
Absolutely.
I learned that eggplant or green peppers wasn't really working for me from one of my friends who said, And I said, okay. And we moved on, and that was cool. That's the nice thing about experiments. You can learn from the failed experiments as much as the ones that went well.
It's usually when you learn more.
The more.
When you fail. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Sheet pan's another one. I've never done a sheet pan pizza.
I have done a few. And
grandma's pizza,
grandma
things like
style,
that.
that'll do it. But again, remember, with sheet pans, typically they're a bit on the thinner side. So making them crispy is not so easy. You do want to oil it up a bit and give it extra time in the oven. So Ken Forkish and other pizza makers recommend that when you want a crispier pizza, it's also a very good idea to cook it in stages. So just the dough with sauce
that makes
for
sense.
several minutes, then pull it out. And if it's kind of crisping up and browning and going the direction you want it to, then put your toppings and finish it. So doing it in 2 stages is a very good idea.
Very smart. Yeah, I didn't even think about that, but that's a great technique to use. But then we get to the point, you just kind of mentioned it, don't start with a pizza oven. Start in the home kitchen.
Absolutely.
I mean, learn to make dough.
Yes.
That's the biggest thing. Once you learn to make dough, I would say another thing that can be stressful is launching dough from the peel into either the pizza oven or the stone that's in your oven. I mean, that's something that people just see these guys just go right in and pull it out, and it's like, oh, that's easy. That's all you do. It can be, there's a technique to it.
There is. So I do have 2 pizza peels that are identical. And so sometimes when I teach people how to launch a pizza, I show them how to launch it from one peel onto the other in practice, and you can kind of go back and forth, And so that's kind of a nice way to develop the technique. Another is, be sure to put a little flour or semolina on your peel before you launch it.
Some ball bearings.
Some ball bearings in there, like semolina. Another one is to shake your pizza before you try launching it, because if it's stuck, you can find that out before you make a mistake.
What's the tip if it's
Well,
stuck?
there's a couple tips actually on this, but my favorite tip on this is, so you give it a little shake. If you see it stuck, you pull one corner of the crust up and you blow under it. And what that will do is it will very gently release the dough that's sticking, from on the peel. It'll kind of release it from there, and it'll create a little air pocket in there, so it'll glide around a little bit better. So that is a pretty master technique. It's a great one. I learned it on YouTube, I'm sure.
Oh, wow.
And it served me very well for many, many.
I learned it for the
launches.
first time tonight. So
It's awesome.
Now I kind of want my dough to stick so I can use
You
it.
can use it, yeah.
So absolutely, you don't have to have a pizza oven, but there's something to be said for having a pizza oven. Once you get to that point where, you're, would I say a pizza chef? You're officially a pizza chef when you got the, I don't want to say you've arrived when you get a pizza oven. You can be inside and still be a great pizza chef. Sure. But there's just something to being able to cook outside in a pizza oven. There
is. I mean, certainly having a pizza oven in your backyard signals that you really love pizza. It doesn't mean you're a great pizza chef necessarily.
Yeah.
But
you're about to find that out about me tonight.
Oh, I can't wait to have you. Well, your dough is amazing. So I'm very excited to see the rest. I'm sure your technique is great. But the thing with, having the oven is it allows you to do different things. So if you want to make a true margarita, Neapolitan style margarita, you have to get over 550 degrees because the pizza.
And not just a little over.
No, about like 800 degrees is kind of a good sweet spot. A lot of people go, 1,000 degrees. No, you're overdoing it now, you know? So 1,000 degrees is very heroic, but it's actually not the sweet spot. I think in Naples, usually it's somewhere between 750 to 850. 900 is definitely the ceiling. And what you're going to start to find happen there is you're going to go beyond leopard spotting. You're going to start burning your pizza. And a little bitterness is good, but an ashy pizza is not so good.
Sure.
Under 700, you're going to get a crispy pizza, but probably not that leopard spotting and that nice charring.
And the bottom of the pizza.
And the bottom of pizza also will not cook the way you want it to cook, right? So you want the bottom to have a degree of structure to it and crispiness. And then you can determine, if you want to be a true purist about Neapolitan pizza, you do not want crispy pizza. You want a floppy pizza because it's cooked in about 90 seconds. And it's all about puffing it up and having a very elastic, soft dough. If you want to be more towards a New York style crispy pizza, just bring that temperature down a little bit. But the big point I would make is that heat and that intensity will bring out certain qualities in your ingredients and your toppings you will never get otherwise. For example, you asked me about sausage. Should we pre-cook our Italian sausage or put it on raw? I always put my Italian sausage on raw, but I mix it with some honey.
Oh.
I learned this from Tony Gemignani, again, on YouTube.
So it caramelizes and gives it a casing around it with this texture?
It's really nice. It caramelizes it. You get little kind of burnt, crisp edges there a bit, and it actually helps kind of heat up the sausage to cook faster. But then the sausage releases some oils, and that goes directly onto the pizza. So ideal to do it that way.
Yeah.
And you can do that again in a home oven, but you can be guaranteed that heat in the pizza oven is going to bring that quality out.
Yeah. I'd never heard, obviously just pinching and putting the dollops of Italian sausage, but
mixing
this
it with honey
thing, that's
honey is brilliant.
Again, loving that I get to learn all this. This is awesome. Well, let's talk pizzas then. Let's talk making the pizza. You can be as creative as you want, but are there any no-nos for you? Are there, let me bring up one that's, worldwide, very controversial, right?
I can't imagine what you're going to ask.
I would bet you could guess what the topping is.
Pineapple,
Yeah,
perhaps?
I think that's probably the one
That's
would
the one.
be
That's
number
the one.
one on the list of controversial toppings.
Well, for many years, I've been, very much against pineapple because I think it's bad for my brand to say it's okay.
Yeah.
But the reality is this: if you can make it taste good, or if it makes you happy, then anything goes on a pizza. I had a pizza class recently where one of my students, who was just so enthusiastic about making pizza, brought pickles. And we made a white pizza with pickles on it. And it was like a kosher dill pickle. And
did it work?
I didn't know how I felt about it, but it popped. It was pretty cool. And I've done some really strange toppings on my pizzas too. And so I think if we can go far out there, like I put pomegranate seeds on my pizzas.
Yeah.
I put them on afterwards, not before cooking. I do lump crab meat with Old Bay seasoning on it.
Yeah.
I do okra on pizzas. I'll do lots of things. I'll put flower petals on pizzas. So why can't pineapple also live in that environment? I would just say, tone it down a little. Make pineapple integrate with your other flavors.
Yes.
My mother came over last week for pizza. Actually, my brothers came over, my whole family, and I made 6 or 7 pizzas. I had pineapple there because my mom loves pineapple. So I made her pineapple, jalapeno, pepperoni. I'm not too proud to make my mom happy.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I have this across the board in food, wine, whiskey, everything. Whiskey, you get a lot of people who go, you can't put ice in a nice glass of whiskey. Hey, drink it how you want.
Yeah.
Same with wine, drink what you like. I might not drink that wine, but if you're enjoying it, that's all that matters. And I say the same thing about pizza. You can make pizza however you want. I might not make it that way. I might not want that topping, but if you're happy, make it that way. And I only say that to let listeners know, don't worry about being judged. You eat what you want to eat.
Look, I can't act like I'm not a pizza elitist. I am, but I'm also very democratic, and I want everyone to be in the pizza tribe. And so, there's love for all toppings and love for all styles. People know me famously for saying that Chicago deep dish is not pizza. I may still say that, but if you love it, then enjoy it and call it pizza.
Yeah, I mean, on that note, I'll call it pizza. I just don't want it very often because, getting back to enjoying this, spread of different flavors, boy, Chicago's going to fill you up pretty quick.
Yeah, one slice. Yeah.
One slice. Talking about, what I would say too about pizza is your palate's going to change. I think when you get into pizza, you've been ordering from wherever, you've been getting whatever they're, they have this list of, I forget what they call them at a lot of places, gourmet pizzas or whatever they might call it. And it has cashews and pineapple and whatever on it. And once you start getting into pizza and you're making things, your palate's going to change. You're going to start to appreciate, one, the dough way more. Yeah. 2, what we haven't talked about, the sauce way more and how that plays a part in making a great pizza. But your toppings are going to change too.
Absolutely.
I find that a lot of people that have come to my house for a while eating pizzas that used to love Supreme now don't want 42 toppings on their pizza.
Yeah.
2 or 3 is my max for
absolutely. Pizza. What's very interesting is that people ask me all the time, and I'm happy to talk about it. They ask me all the time about what are the best pizzerias here locally in Houston. Also in other cities. I'm kind of the pizza hotline for a lot of my friends. They're, hey, Ravi, I'm in New York. Where should I go to eat? Or Chicago or Portland. And so I am the hotline. I will give them an answer. I'll tell them where to go. But the honest truth, and I know this is going to sound a little like kind of woo-woo, but the best pizza is the one you have yet to make. That's yours. Yeah. And I think it's kind of like I have been hearing a lot about Rick Rubin lately, and he talks a lot about the creative process. And he says, kind of get weird and be yourself.
Yeah.
And the more you do that, you're going to find an audience that loves you and is passionate about what you do. But you got to start with you being your own audience and experimenting and creating your own pizza. Your dough may be completely different than mine, but I might try it and be like, wow, I never expected this. So I would say get a little weird and get personal.
I 100% agree. And I think to your point, it's very satisfying. And it's satisfying when you share that with folks and you see, to your point of, what could be your reaction to it, where you go, man, this is fantastic. And it's the same thing. I always say a lot of times some of the greatest recipes were accidents, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like we were making something and, oh, crap, that spilled. Well, just let it go. And then people are like, that's fantastic, whatever it might be. So to your point of being, weird and creative, just if it strikes you to throw it on there and see how it comes out.
Today, you guys tried pizza with hot honey, right? Pepperoni hot honey.
Yeah, and it'll be a staple now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And my friend and I, we were talking about this because he's a photographer, and we said all great ideas are borrowed, but then they're made your own.
Absolutely.
And so that is absolutely true of hot honey. I can't claim that. Like lots of pizzerias do with hot honey, but I use it in a way that works for me and that kind of helps me amplify my voice as a pizza maker.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Cheeses. Well, let me get back to sauces because we talked about that. Cooked or uncooked?
For me, across the board, uncooked is the only way
Always.
that I make pizza. Yes, always across the board, except every now and then I will do things like use cherry tomatoes. I'll kind of cook them in the oven with some olive oil, salt, basil, and garlic, and then I'll blend it. And it makes some olive oil in there, yeah. So it makes a very particular tart kind of pizza sauce that's kind of cool, and it's very fresh. And so I'm down with that. But typically I will use canned certified San Marzano tomatoes. And I do not cook the pizza, so I kind of bring the sauce together with salt, basil, olive oil, maybe some garlic, depending on what kind of style I'm going for. But it's generally those components, I blend them, I drain any excess water, and then I put it on the dough and it cooks in the oven. We have tested this many, many, many times, and what you get with that type of uncooked sauce is a brightness from the tomato that you do not get from a cooked sauce.
Agreed.
But I need to defend cooked sauce because my favorite pizza I've ever had was at Luke Howley's in New York. One of my friends who did something that I don't feel comfortable doing. He went into Luke Howley's wearing my Doughfather t-shirt. So I feel a little weird about doing that, but he went and did that and was representing, and I really love that. He knows how amazing that pizza is. I know. And that's a cooked sauce. It's very smooth. It's amazing. And Mark Iacono, who's the master there, it comes from an Italian-American heritage, and cooked sauces are legit. So, again, he made it his own.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so when I first started making pizzas, because, prior to pizzas, I'd made a lot of pastas, I thought the more flavorful sauce would be a cooked sauce. And come to find out, I was wrong. It had flavor, but it was a different type of flavor than I think I wanted. And come to find out, I did not want in my pizza. I wanted that, to what your point was, that fresh, kind of clean, that bright, acidic tomato to shine through versus that reduced, loaded up with garlic and onion and oregano and all and that's what you get in the sauce. I come to quickly find that's not the sauce I prefer.
Yeah.
Other than in a deep dish casserole.
Right. Yeah. Cooked sauces are really great for pastas and perhaps deep dish. But when it comes to, I make a hybrid pizza. It's like a New York-politan, is usually what I call it. And so what I like about these simpler sauces is that the sauce is a supporting element, and it's not the thing that's overpowering all these amazing toppings that you can play with. And I think if every element has a very distinct flavor, it doesn't get muddy in your overall flavor profile. So I've got the flavor of the dough and the smell of the dough and the saltiness of the dough, some of the char there. Then you've got the acidity and sweetness of the sauce that shouldn't be too complicated. A touch of basil in there, salt in there. And then you've got the cheeses, which is a whole other world, or it could be simple. because sometimes the cheese can be the star, but sometimes it can be another supporting element for these pops of flavor that come on top of the toppings.
But, anytime you talk about cooking, you talk about balance, right?
Absolutely.
With ingredients, salt's a great thing for food, but too much of it's not a good thing. Not enough of it's not a good thing. You've got to hit the balance in that. And I think pizza's the same way. And I'm saying that to say, when we travel, I love to hit up pizzerias, local mom and pop places that are thought to be pretty good. My wife will tell you she'll want a pizza with some toppings, but I always have to order the smallest they'll make in just a cheese pizza. I want to know their dough. I want to taste their sauce. I want to see what kind of cheese, the volume of cheese, because some places just way too much cheese,
right?
And things like that. What are your when you go to a pizza place? What do you order a pepperoni? Do you order something with toppings, or do you kind of take my approach and just let's see what the three? These are the three foundational pieces to making a great pizza to me.
Right, absolutely. I do very similar things. So if I'm interested in a specialty pizza on the menu, I will order it, but I always order margarita.
Margarita, okay.
Sorry, and that's only at a Neapolitan or hybrid style pizzerias. Sure. At a New York style, I never order a margarita.
Yeah.
A New York style margarita is not very pleasant to me.
Agreed.
It's got those kind of chopped beefsteak tomatoes on there and the little ribbons of chiffonade of basil, and it just doesn't really come together. And usually it's a white pizza, and that's not what a margarita pizza is.
Yeah.
So New York style, I would just get a slice of cheese. So is it okay if I share some brand or some pizza restaurants in Houston?
Absolutely. I think shout out.
Yeah, I love Romano's.
I do
I've been
too.
going there for over 20 years. I think, they are the best New York style pizzeria in Houston, and I only will get pizza by the slice there. It's just my preference.
That's the way they do it in New York.
That's how we did all in the East Coast growing up, and so you get a slice, you get them to heat it up. Usually it's going to be a bit crispier and sturdier. And a slice of cheese is the one you kind of judge the pizzeria on.
Yeah.
And then you can add one topping or maybe two toppings or put a little dry oregano. And speaking of, sauces that are too complicated, don't put the oregano in the sauce. Just powder it on top of your pizza afterwards, because oregano will burn or kind of get lost.
So when it comes out of the oven, just a little.
So you
on
get the
top.
aroma.
Yeah.
You get the aroma of the oregano. But yeah, so when I'm in a more Neapolitan style, I will absolutely get the margarita. That's my go-to.
Yeah, absolutely. So here's a question I have for you. My opinion is, tell me if you agree or disagree. When I order that pizza that I'm kind of evaluating, I don't want to say judging, but I'm gaining my opinion on their pizza. On a cheese pizza, I still want to see sauce.
So I'm glad you brought this up, because there's another New York style pizzeria in Houston that doesn't have the proper sauce to cheese ratio, and it really bothers me. And I really want to like the pizza. When you go to a classic place like Joe's on, I think it's on Bleecker in New York, they have that perfect ratio where the pizza actually looks a bit red, where the mozzarella and the sauce kind of get married together. And if the pizza is just white and there's not very much sauce, the mouthfeel is not so good. You don't get all the benefit of the sweetness of the tomato and the acidity of the tomato. That ratio is where it's at. And of course, with a margarita pizza, it's going to be the opposite. Dollops of cheese, much more sauce. So this ratio is very, very important.
Very important. I think sometimes on that cheese, that New York style cheese, too much cheese, you take a bite and, most of the cheese just pulls off with it. And it's like, that's terrible.
I mean, you might like ketchup on your hot dog, but you don't want it smothered in ketchup,
That's
right? It's all about the ratio.
Yeah,
it's all about the ratio.
Balance.
Yeah.
Exactly right. Well, we've talked a little bit about cheese. Let's get into cheeses. Because obviously, when people think pizza, they go mozzarella.
Yeah, mozzarella.
But again, talking about how creative you can be, there are some great cheeses that can create some just awesome pizzas when you put these things together.
Look, you said mozzarella, and I thought about 6 or 7 types of mozzarella.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good
that's
point.
the thing, right?
Yeah.
So when I hear mozzarella, I go, what kind? Is it cow milk mozzarella or buffalo mozzarella? Is it a fresh mozzarella, or is it a low moisture shredded mozzarella? Are you getting it as a brick and shredding yourself, or are you getting it pre-shredded, which is going to have some coatings on it?
Yeah.
Let's
interrupt there and say, please don't buy the.
Don't buy that. Buy the block of mozzarella and shred it so you don't have those additives.
Yeah.
And then what about, for example, burrata? Burrata is a wonderful mozzarella cheese.
Yeah.
So lots of different options just within mozzarella. One of my favorites is sliced mozzarella. So I do what sliced mozzarella is, I do an upside down pizza, which is a very New York style thing to do.
Upside down pizza.
Upside down pizza. It's wonderful. So in New York, a lot of places that really take pride in their sauce will do an upside down pizza, which is the cheese on the bottom right on top of the dough. So you take slices of mozzarella, put it right on the dough, and then you dollop your sauce on top, kind of like they do in Detroit style, where the sauce goes on top.
Yeah.
And then you could finish it with some pecorino if you want, or something on those lines.
Well, in Chicago, too, with sauce on top.
Yeah, sauce on top. So what's nice about that is you get much more sauce mouthfeel. It's more sauce forward. And for some reason, I find that the way that the cheese and sauce merges with upside down is just very gratifying, especially when you then dust it with some, again, pecorino and oregano, dry oregano. It's lovely. It's great.
Yeah.
So we just talked about mozzarella for a few minutes, right? That was one cheese.
Yeah.
Yeah. But typically with pizza, you want to have a balance of a few different types of cheeses. There was the OG pizza shop in Brooklyn. Dom DeMarco ran it since 1967 until he passed away a few years ago. It's called Doughfather's. And if you've heard of Doughfather's, but it is the best slice in New York for year after year after year. And they use a blend of 3 cheeses. So they'll always put some pecorino or grana padano or a hard cheese. I believe it's pecorino, not Parmesan, but pecorino. Then some shredded low moisture mozzarella, which is a very New York style pizza cheese you would use.
I'm wondering if the third one's mine. Go ahead.
The third one's going to be dollops of buffalo mozzarella.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And those 3 bring 3 very different qualities that when they merge together, they're super satisfying. So you got the saltiness and kind of the graininess and nuttiness from the pecorino. You've got the kind of the nice cheese pull and gooiness from the low moisture mozzarella.
Yeah.
And then from the buffalo mozzarella, you've got creaminess.
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
I've never had, and I think I mentioned this to you, buffalo mozzarella. I've just never
It's hard
been
to
able
find.
to find it. Yeah.
It's hard to find. And people call fresh mozzarella buffalo mozzarella all the time, but it's not, because a buffalo is a different animal.
Is it really?
Believe it or not. And you wouldn't believe this, actually. And we have Texas buffalo. And if you go all the way I was past San Antonio in Hill Country, there's an amazing place.
I've seen it.
Yeah. Do you remember the name of it?
I don't. We drive by it because we go that way a lot.
I've got to look it up. I went there. I had some of their buffalo milk ice cream. It was amazing.
Yeah.
But having local buffalo in Texas is amazing, because that means you could have fresh local buffalo mozzarella. And the thing about buffalo mozzarella is fantastic is that it's much fattier and delicious. It's almost got this kind of yogurty kind of quality to it. So it's like fresh mozzarella, but more delicious.
When you say yogurty, I think a little tang. Is there
a little tang, a little creaminess. Okay. It's just...
See, now I even want to try it more.
It's amazing. Yeah. It's amazing. So where you can get this in Houston, believe it or not, is at places like Central Markets, sometimes at Whole Foods. I get mine usually at Costco, but it is imported from Italy. And so I think the Garofalo brand is the one they have at Costco. It's imported from Italy, so it's going to maybe a little extra tangy. Okay. But I would use it. It's amazing. Yeah. I like putting it on my pizza's cold at the end.
So you're putting that on fresh, coming out of the oven, and then you're dressing it with, this is your finishing
chunks
cheese.
of buffalo mozzarella, and people love it. It's I will say it's one of the tricks up my sleeve. Yeah. But we didn't talk about all these other cheeses, right?
Yeah,
you could put cheddar. You could put...
I've never done... Well, I take that back. I did a cheeseburger pizza one time.
Do it. It's great.
Yeah, just, living on the edge, right? I did a Philly cheesesteak pizza one time. Cook the onions and the shaved ribeye and make a Philly cheesesteak pizza. So
I mean, that sounds great.
Yeah, to your point.
You can do ricotta, I think is a very... classic cheese to use. Goat cheese.
My wife can't get enough ricotta on pizza. Yeah. I'll put little dollops on a pizza, and she's like, "Can you put more?"
Exactly.
She just loves ricotta.
Well, there's a pizza maker I mentioned earlier, Frank Pinello of Best Pizza. A lot of people have recreated his white pizza, which is some low moisture kind of gooey mozzarella, plus big dollops of ricotta, and then dollops of caramelized onion all over the pizza, and it's unbelievable.
We do that version, but we add bacon.
Why not?
Yeah. We like the combination of caramelized onions and bacon. So
yeah, it's awesome.
That might be one here in just a little while.
Yeah.
Another pizza that my wife and I love is with goat cheese.
Wonderful.
I'll do a pizza where I'll just brush it with some olive oil, the dough, and a little garlic on there, and some goat cheese and let it just cook a little bit, pull it out, dress it with some arugula, some prosciutto, and drizzle it with some balsamic vinegar, and delicious.
Yeah,
it's one of my wife's
great.
favorite pizzas. Yeah.
It's kind of interesting also to think about things that go together on salads or sandwiches and say, could I bring that combination over to a pizza?
Yeah.
That's kind of a nice way. There is a dish in kind of France and Switzerland called raclette, and they use a very specific cheese called raclette cheese. It's just very gooey, very smelly, but in a good way.
Yeah, pungent.
And they pair it with potatoes, some type of cured, hams, and some pickled elements. And I made a pizza off of that, and it was pretty awesome because that raclette cheese has such a unique nose to it and texture to it that's very satisfying. So I was like, why not try it out? And it was a big success.
Yeah. And we're talking about all these great cheeses and toppings that you can do. And we haven't gotten too much into toppings. Maybe we can talk a little bit about that. All the different toppings. I mean, it's endless, but some of your favorites. Let's go there. Let's start here. I think that simple can be good. We can go creative. People are hearing this going, man, you can make all kinds of amazing and super cool and creative and delicious pizzas. But sometimes just a solid cheese pizza at home can hit the spot.
Yeah.
Or to your point, I would go more Italian sausage. Just some
Totally.
Italian sausage with maybe a little sauteed mushroom on there with it or something. You can hit the spot.
Let's kind of get down to basics first. I would say, something my younger brother, who's a chef, tells me all the time is that he likes to keep it simple. Cheese pizza, maybe pepperoni, but really keep it simple. If you do that right with a cheese pizza, again, you could use Doughfather's trick with toppings and go super heavy with fresh basil, olive oil, pecorino on a cheese pizza, and it completely elevates it because that basil just pops. It's just incredible, right? But then we can keep on upping the ante with toppings as we go on. I like fresh Italian sausage, white onion, and mint. That's one that I like.
Okay.
And I think a lot about herbs as toppings because, if you put sage on a mushroom pizza, it's very different than basil or rosemary on a mushroom pizza. So I think about the combination of, is it red or white pizza? What toppings are happening? And how am I using herbs or other condiments to finish them? So it's that combination, that balance of those things. When we get a bit more complex with our pizzas, I will get into things like using brie cheese and figs on the pizza.
Oh, I love that.
But then top it with arugula, balsamic drizzle, and some prosciutto. So we have those elements of herb, which is like the arugula, the prosciutto, which is a meat. You've got the balsamic, which brings that sweetness to the picture, and then a funky cheese and a fruit.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of fun, doing that, kind of making it work.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got a question. Would you ever consider doing a dessert pizza?
I have done dessert pizzas.
Tell me about that.
Well, simple pizzas. I've done some with pears, with honey, with brie, and then I've done an apple crumble like you might see at the old pizza places that you would see, that kind of pizza.
Yeah.
I haven't expanded a whole lot on different types. Do you have something different? What I've seen that I want to do that I haven't done is like that Nutella with some strawberries and things like that after.
Yeah, that's
and
one
making
that,
icing for it.
Yeah, that's one that I do a lot. That's a crowd pleaser, not just because I just put a bunch of Nutella on there, because that's easy.
Yeah.
And look, my background is as an artist, so I like to treat my pizza like art, and I want to find that balance and also have it. This is what Mark Iacona Lucalio said: the pizza should first be delicious to the eyes, right?
And we eat first with our eyes.
With our eyes, right? Yeah. And so my Nutella pizza, actually, I cook it without any toppings, and you have to kind of poke holes in the dough so it doesn't puff up in the middle, right? Like a balloon. So you do that, you pull it out, and then while it's very hot, you slather Nutella all over it, and then cover it with mini marshmallows. Not the big ones, the mini ones.
Oh, and then you put it back in.
Then you put it back in. You see where I'm going with this,
s'mores,
right?
Yeah.
And you put it back in, but you got to really keep an eye on it because it will burn very quickly.
Yeah.
So you just want to brown it, caramelize it, rotate it a couple times, bring it back out.
That's interesting.
And we're not done because then I usually have a bunch of cold sliced strawberries ready, and I cover the entire marshmallow surface with the strawberries. I might hit it with a touch of salt and then some mint leaves, and then I cut it. Now, the reason the strawberries is there is not just because it tastes delicious in this flavor profile, especially with that mint and Nutella and all these
Sure.
things going on.
Hazelnut, yeah.
But if you try to put a pizza cutter through marshmallows, it doesn't end
It's just
well.
going to stick and run away. Yeah.
So the mushrooms kind of cauterizes the gooey marshmallow, and it allows you to cut through it. So this is one of my pizzas for anyone who's ever attended one of my pizza and wine classes that they would be familiar with. I've done this a lot of parties as well, because when you have all these savory pizzas, you need something to turn the other way to kind of cleanse your palate. And so one way is to go with a dessert pizza that's very sweet and kind of freshens your palate up. Yeah. Another way is to go.
I'm thinking your herbs. A lot of the herbs are palate cleansers.
They're cleansers, but I made a pizza recently at a pizza class, a dough making and pizza making class, where we didn't put any cheese at all. So it's kind of a marinara pizza.
Okay.
And so that's a red sauce, usually some sliced garlic. Maybe you could make it more like a puttanesca, where you add some capers and red pepper and olives. But there's no creaminess from the cheese, and that acts as a palate cleanser because it's a very acidic. Yeah, and even kind of briny type of pizza.
You could put some of olives,
anchovies and things like that.
Artichokes.
So anytime I ask people, like, do you like anchovies? Expect them to always say no, and I'm surprised how many people do like anchovies. Anchovies on a marinara pizza is the way to go. Yeah. It's much better than anchovy on a cheese pizza, I would say.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like anchovies.
Yeah. But try it on a red pizza.
I need to do that.
It's pretty amazing.
I'm trying to think. I don't think I've ever made or had a red pizza.
Oh, you'll love it.
Yeah,
we might make one today.
Huh?
What do you think? Yeah.
Shame on me. Should have been doing that.
It's awesome.
Let's finish up with tips for the home chef. Things in getting started. If we're going to start the pizza journey.
Yeah.
Things that you would, and we hit on these kind of a lot as we went through, but let's put some bullet points out, just kind of remind them as they're listening to this.
Yeah.
These are some of the things that you want to.
For sure. So first is, let's assume you don't know anything. You need to get some knowledge somewhere. The best places to get knowledge on pizza making are absolutely YouTube. There's certain books I will recommend, like The Elements of Pizza by Ken Forkish, Pizza Camp by Joe Badia. He's an amazing pizza maker in Philadelphia who I met a few years ago.
My first book was The Pizza Bible.
The Pizza Bible, Tony Gemignani, right? Yeah. And you could even put Mark Vetri's pizza. I can't remember the name of the book, but Mark Vetri also has an amazing book on pizza as well. So get a good book. I personally started with Ken Forkish and really kind of graduated and bridged the gap with Joe Badia's Pizza Camp. So you got YouTube, you got the pizza show, you got like people like Vito Iacopelli.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, great guy. And these books. The next thing is, let's say you get a pizza oven like a Rockbox or Uni. There are Facebook groups there, and they're very, very active. And so you can ask lots of questions there. I've been doing that for years and contributing as well. So those are kind of...
I didn't even think about that.
Oh, they're fantastic. Online communities are great. Yeah.
I've joined some online communities, but they've been pizza driven, not oven or vessel, cooking method kind of driven.
Yeah. Yeah. So
that's
a lot of those out there. Yeah. And then, maybe the last resource I might recommend is, beyond like taking pizza classes, because frankly, I don't know which pizza classes out there are good. I know what I do in my classes.
Yeah.
So I don't want to send anyone to a pizza class as if they will get good knowledge from that. But I get inspiration, maybe not information, but inspiration from Instagram. I've learned a lot about toppings and different styles
just
and
from
presentation,
looking at
just looking at stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I follow a lot of really cool people on Instagram, like Lupa Cotta, Ines Glazer. She's an amazing, amazing chef in Los Angeles. Some of my friends like Chef Salim Ghaffari, who's based in Australia, and my other friend Ali, who's got this amazing New York style pizzeria in Australia as well. So I watch their, it's called Sunnyside Slice, and I just watch the Instagrams to get inspiration all the time. I could give you a long list of those guys, but the real question was, how do you really get started, right? What are the tools you need, all that. Yeah. So again, simple pizza is going to be flour, water, yeast, salt, period, right? Your dough in terms of making the dough. So start with making dough. I just can't, reinforce how important doing that right from the beginning is. because that's the thing that people have the most fear about. So just get out of the way, mess up a few times.
Yep.
Don't go depending on Whole Foods or some other Trader Joe's or the pizzeria down the street to provide your dough, because you might be doing everything right and that dough you got was kind of wrong.
Well, and one thing I want to throw out on the dough is make a batch.
Make a batch. You're going to get 3 to 6 dough balls out of
exactly
it.
that.
Yeah. 3
to 6, because when you go to launch, you might have a boo-boo there too, and then you just go, oh, well, and you clean it up and you make the next pizza.
Extra dough you can freeze.
Yeah, and you can freeze if you don't use it. Yeah.
So I'd say just kind of start making some dough. Where I would compromise, honestly, would be using a jarred spaghetti sauce or any kind of a jarred
I'm rolling
tomato
my
sauce.
eyes, Rob.
I know. For the pizza maker, the new guy or woman who is already stressed out about dough and now is getting distracted with sauce, I would say focus on your dough. Maybe use a canned sauce like a Rouse homemade. I'll use that in a pinch, just as a bridge, and then use shredded mozzarella because the fancy mozzarella is more expensive. And so use that to kind of just get
the
started.
Method, the process down.
And then start investing more into your tools and invest more into your toppings and invest in your friends and feed your friends.
Absolutely.
And get that feedback.
And to your point earlier, tell them to be honest. Get the good feedback, because we all know you can't get better at something if you don't know what you're not doing right.
Yeah, look, pizza is love, feedback is love, and taking that feedback with love is good, and it works for everybody because you become a better pizza maker and they get to eat better pizza.
That's exactly
so
right.
Let's just lean into this and all kind of develop together.
Yeah, absolutely. We mentioned it early on, but have a few pieces of equipment that you need to have to get started. Pizza steel and a pizza peel.
And then you absolutely have to have a scale where you can measure in grams and tenth of grams. So usually I get a very small micro scale. You can get on Amazon for probably $10. Got a couple batteries in there. It'll last for a while. It's just wonderful. It's easy to use for yeast and your salt and your oil. And then for your heavier ingredients like the water and your flour, you need a slightly more substantial scale.
Yep.
Probably $20 on Amazon.
Yep. Not and a lot of them now you can buy with the USB-C, and you just charge them.
Charge them that way.
Yeah.
That's mine works like that.
Yeah.
It's great. Beyond that, what else do you need? Things you already have in your kitchen: olive oil, salt.
Yeah, and let's just say,
cans of tomatoes.
it helps, but it's not necessary to have a KitchenAid mixer. I mean, it does, not having to knead by hand for 10, 15 minutes is great, but it's not necessary to start making dough.
It's really not necessary. I will be honest that I only do my batches by hand because I am the Doughfather, but also because I sold my mixer, because my mixer was a pretty major industrial mixer that I got from a friend of mine who owns an amazing bread business. And it was good for making batches for like 30 or 50 dough balls.
Yeah.
So I do up to 30 dough balls by hand. So you can do
how many?
30 dough balls worth.
Wow.
So it's a few kilos worth of
I'm surprised
dough.
your forearms aren't a lot bigger.
Yeah, I know. But, what I'm saying by that, what I mean to say by that is that you can make a batch of 3 to 6 to 12 dough balls all by hand. You can do it, but if you have a KitchenAid, throw it all in there. And the books that I mentioned earlier will give you a process for how to attack making dough. And we don't have to go through that right now, but there are many different philosophies on that. So
as we said earlier, part of this process, you do need to fail. I mean, you're going to fail. And so we're not going to...
That's what you learn.
We're not going to let you... We had to go through the journey. The listeners need to, tackle along a little bit as well. We're being funny, of course.
No, but frankly, even a bad pizza is still pretty good because it is pizza.
Hey, you know how many times I've said, well, it doesn't look good, but she'll eat.
Exactly.
Pull it
Tastes
out.
Great.
Big hole in the middle.
It's okay.
The crust and everything's good to go. It's going to happen.
Yeah. So
and then you just turn the heat up and it'll burn right off, and then you scrape it out and you're done.
Yeah. A famous pizza maker said, anybody can make great pizza. You just have to make a lot of them.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Another tip I think maybe you would agree with, don't overcook your proteins before you put them into
Yeah. We were talking about toppings. We didn't really talk about what not to put on pizza.
Is there something?
Well, I personally don't put chicken on pizza because chicken tends to dry anyway, and then it may dry out some more on pizza. So if you're going to put a protein like that on there, you might want to protect it a little bit with other toppings. So maybe some
like a
veggies
buffalo
on
sauce
top,
or something?
Yeah,
Make it
or a
wet?
sauce or
Yeah.
things like that, or some other toppings that layer into it, and that will protect that protein from drying out even more. But that is a very good question. I personally don't love like beef necessarily on
I was
pizza,
just going
but
to
you
say
can
that.
do it. But
Yeah,
don't love it.
You brought that up. I asked a question. I went, really? There's something you can't put? And right
Yeah.
away I thought beef.
Beef
You said
might be
chicken
one.
first, but I think both apply. I wouldn't.
Generally
I've never
speaking,
put them on. Yeah.
Yeah, generally speaking, I think pork is the perfect meat for pizza. Yeah. Whether it's prosciutto or slices of ham or bacon
Or
or
barbecue smoked pulled pork.
I've done pulled pork pizza using. It was a pulled pork from the pit room. I used their sauce and their pickled onions, and it was an amazing pizza. Yeah,
That's a good point.
Yeah.
The other thing I would say about toppings is, we kind of talked about it earlier from, just a taste profile. You don't want too many. You don't want it to get too heavy on that for handling, getting it on the peel and off the peel and things like that too.
Yeah, I kind of lost track as we got into topping land. I got really excited about that, but you're right. Back to, home chefs, things to do or not do. One of the things definitely to not do is over sauce your pizza, put too much cheese and put too much toppings because the pizza literally gets heavy. It's hard to get off the peel and things won't cook in a way that's really pleasant at the end.
Absolutely.
Maybe your crust will cook, but all the toppings are swimming in sauce, and you got to get that proportion. So it's always better to go lighter and then learn how to add than starting heavy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Prepping for pizza, do it the day before. A lot of the things, slicing up veggies, pre-cooking, your caramelized onions or sauteing your mushrooms.
Your mushrooms, yeah. So I think raw mushrooms is just not particularly pleasant on pizza, and mushroom umami comes out through the cooking process. So definitely cook your mushrooms in advance. We didn't talk about mushrooms as toppings, but
My favorite.
I go to Super H Mart in Chinatown and I go get their mushrooms.
Oh, yeah.
They're much more affordable and you have a beautiful variety. You can buy lots of them and mix multiple mushrooms up on, for your pizza topping.
Great idea.
And they need to be salted and cooked and all that. So for sure, I do, for example, let me break it down this way. Thursday night is my dough and often my sauce night. So I make my dough and sauce on Thursday night. Friday will be my shopping day, and then I'll prep all my ingredients. So anything that needs to be pre-cooked will happen there. Anything that doesn't will be portioned and put in some type of a container, some type of lid possibly. And then Saturday is mise en place day, where I will get everything laid out and I have a nice organized pizza making area, because once you start cooking, it can get chaotic.
Yes.
And so you don't want to be running to the fridge and opening up your pepperoni container and having bags of stuff all around. Do a mise en place. It makes your life easier. It makes your cleanup easier.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Getting back to the dough, just another tip. I don't think we talked about this. When you make your dough and you do that, cold fermentation for a couple days, 48 hours.
Yeah.
Pulling the dough out prior to when you're going to use it.
Yeah.
At least 2 hours, something like
I do typically about one, only because I end up cooking for a couple hours. So it will continue to, relax a bit more. But I'd say anywhere from 1 to 2 hours is ideal. Dough that comes out of the fridge, which is usually around 40 to 45 degrees, is going to take a while to warm up to at least 65 to 70 degrees. Why do I know these numbers? Because I have a laser thermometer. That's a good tool, by the way. A laser thermometer is a good one. So you can check the temperature of your stone before you start throwing pizzas onto the stone. You want it to be around 700 to 800 degrees. But back to your dough, you need it to get to at least room temperature and relax, so you're not tugging at it and pulling at it when you're trying to stretch it.
Yeah.
Relaxed dough is really easy to handle and to stretch out.
And fun.
And it's fun.
Yeah, it makes it nice, pleasant to handle.
Yeah,
for sure.
And you have the option, I think, of putting your dough in separate containers, each dough ball, or putting them all into one kind of pizza tray. I think for the beginner, absolutely buy a bunch of small containers or get some small bowls, put some saran on them. And it's very important to always cover your dough. Yeah. Otherwise, it will dry out and create like a leathery skin on the outside. Yeah. If that happens, you put a wet towel on it and it'll rehydrate that leathery skin. But we want to avoid that.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing I want to say about a pizza steel or a stone, if you're using that in your home oven, when you're going to go to warm up your oven, put it in when you're warming up the oven. Let it get hot. I don't want people. I don't know if we made that clear, but don't let it get to 550, then throw your stone in and then launch a pizza. You want
it's
that
a cold
stone.
It's a cold stone or a cone steel. Yeah. The other thing with the stone, the reason I don't like stones as much as baking steels is the stones tend to crack a lot. And that usually happens. Let's say if you launch a pizza on there and it's got a tear in there and just a touch of sauce, touches that stone, it can crack the stone.
Yeah.
So stones can be a little dodgy, and if you end up cracking 2 stones, you probably should have bought a baking steel.
Yeah, and you kind of touched on it, but setting up when you go to cook day, the station where you're going to prep and having everything out that you're going to use and having it at the ready is very important.
Yeah, and I called it a mise en place. It really is like a pizza station, and I think of it typically left to right or right to left. So if I've got my dough on the left side, right next to that, I'm going to have my bowl of flour, so the dough goes right into the flour, and then I have an area to stretch the dough, and then I have sauce. And then to the right of that's my cheese, and to the right of that is my toppings. Okay. So it's a very much systematic kind of,
You can be looking down at something and you're just grabbing
because
you know where it's at.
Yeah. I know where it's at. Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Well, let's close out this episode with your favorite pizzas that you enjoy making your pizzas. And then what's the favorites from the people who you cook for? What is the most requested pizza?
One?
Yeah.
So I mentioned earlier, my favorites, again, are a pure Neapolitan-style pizza or a New York-style cheese pizza with extra basil and some microplaned pecorino on top. Yeah. I like that very powdery pecorino, maybe a touch of olive oil. I think that's it's the supreme simplicity and minimalism in pizza.
And if people don't know, when we talk about pecorino, it's a sheep's cheese. So it's not, cow or anything like that. It's a different. If you've never had it, it's a little bit different, but it's cool. It's very good.
I used to call it Romano cheese, but it's actually pecorino cheese, Pecorino Romano, right, from Rome. So I think that is absolutely my favorite, but I have a lot of favorites, but my next one would be the Italian sausage, white onion, and mint. I like that a lot. And I might make that one spicy. Either add some harissa into that pizza or some type of a spicy sauce on top.
Like a little bit of a chili oil or
something? It could be a chili oil. It could be a jalapeno aioli.
Oh, yeah.
That's kind of nice.
Okay,
we got cream sauce going there too. Lots of good things like that, or just some crushed red pepper. I usually have like those little Pekin peppers, and I crush them by hand on top of that. So a spicy sausage and onion pizza, I think, is a beautiful thing.
You mentioned one that you make. It's a mushroom pizza that has a little lemon mixed into it.
Yeah, let's talk about this one. Okay, so it will always be on my menu. It will be at every single pizza wine tasting I do, and it's the most popular pizza I make. I don't know how I invented it. It's very much my pizza. And I know I got inspiration from different pizzas along the way, but it's essentially a white pizza with a lot of pecorino and 2 types of mozzarella. Sometimes I've gone as far as putting Munster cheese, sliced Munster, or a British cheddar. I'll play with the cheeses a bit, but a nice good white base that has some funkiness and some saltiness to it. Then sauteed mushrooms. So I use shimeji mushrooms, oyster mushrooms, king trumpet, and maitake, something of those lines. Yeah. I might mix it up, or maybe beach mushrooms. It's just a mix of different mushrooms. And those are pre-sauteed with garlic, rosemary, olive oil, and salt. So basically, white pizza, you put that amazing mix of mushrooms on top, and when it comes out, I hit it with 2 things, actually. So I hit it with truffle oil and microplaned lemon zest.
Oh, wow.
It's unbelievable. So I've got the most feedback on that one. I recommend people trying it out.
I'm hoping we get to try it tonight.
Yeah.
So looking forward to that. Well, this has been great, Ravi. Really appreciate you coming on. Been a great conversation. I'm hoping maybe in the future we'll maybe go down some specific rabbit holes of pizza and have some more conversations on the podcast about pizza. Love the topic. Love to cook pizza. And to me, anytime we can kind of have a conversation and inspire and encourage and motivate other people to get into the pizza game, man, I think they should. It's just a wonderful thing to do at your home with family and friends. And by the way, you're eating some great, delicious food along the way.
Yeah. Pizza is magic. I really recommend people kind of discovering how to be a pizza musician. It's not so complicated. It's so rewarding. Make it your own. And I really appreciate you inviting me here to talk about my story. I will say it was a story of kind of rejuvenation through cooking, friends, giving to others, and I'm just happy to share it.
Yeah, and tell them one more time. I know we said at the beginning. Let's finish. Where can they find you? IG, Instagram,
Instagram,
most popular. What's the handle there?
Yeah, it's Doughfather HTX for Houston. Very proud to be making pizza in the city. Also proud to see all these great pizzerias popping up. If you're interested also in my favorite pizzerias in Houston, I do have it in my link list at the top. Check that out.
That's a great resource.
Yeah, it's good.
And who knows, maybe you and I will go around and check out some more and give a little feedback or something.
That would be cool.
That'd be fun.
All right.
Well, thanks everybody for listening to this episode of Food, Wine, and Whiskey. And until our next episode, enjoy your next pour.